Hello, everyone. This is Faheem Jackson, and it's episode 102 of my podcast show, In the Know. This podcast is aimed at trying to guide people through the world with a variety of topics. I am also using this platform to ask questions and try my best to answer these questions with my viewpoints of the world around me. The following episode introduction speech is for the topic of today, and that introduction speech is regarding: do we truly answer to a higher power? If you're someone that went to church, like myself as a child, then you know that you always heard we answer to a higher power. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people who don't believe in these sentiments. As for the people who tend to believe in God, they see themselves as being watched over by a higher power. Let's assume this is to be true. What would be the daily behavior of a person that does want to believe we look to the sky for our guidance? Well, hopefully within the topic today, we can look over our religious beliefs to understand why we may need to follow the rules and adhere to a higher power. So, who is the higher power? This is a very easy response because the higher power would be God, the Alpha and the Omega who created the heavens and earth. And furthermore, we will assume this is to be true so that we can come to the conclusion that God is the man we speak to with our problems. But him seeing all and knowing all is proof he knew already. He's just waiting for you to come to him. I grew up in a household with a mother who would find herself having a conversation with God and moving in life in such a way that was as if God was watching. To me, it was a little odd to see. I never thought to look to the sky and ask for anything, nor do I look to the sky to answer to anyone. My brain always answered to someone here on earth. Now, what if the higher power that we answer to is not God, but more of a concept, an idea? What is the higher power? From an idea standpoint? What is the idea of the higher power? And the reason why I say this is because we don't assume an idea is associated with higher power. What is that idea in the form of? Meaning, is the brain an aspect of a higher power that we have to answer to? Because let's say the brain gives us the ability to make decisions that are rational. So we answer to this level of logic. That driving logic is what makes our society move forward. You have people from the religious side not like this claim because a lot of times their mind doesn't work in ways that can make sense of the world around them. And this is because the Bible has a way of filling in the blanks for people, simply because the bricklayers had a keen understanding of the world, even though their views were quite local in who they were talking to. But since this section is about the idea, you are the higher power, which means you answer to yourself, and you must live with the decisions you make for yourself. So think and choose wisely. Let's observe some cultural interpretations. Depending on the culture you come from, people all have different interpretations of who they answer to and why. Some people repent as a way to show how they answer to God, while others pray on a daily basis in order to show their commitment to God. Now, I come from the Christian faith, with a household I grew up in at least. So answering to a higher power was a reason for maintaining a clean and balanced lifestyle. And because you come from a culture where you have to be clean, then this might be a deciding factor in how you move forward with your life. For those that don't quite understand, let's observe our existence on this earth. The human lives on this earth? See, as we live our lives on this earth, most people don't move about like they answer to a higher power. Most of us live our lives like we answer to the government, yet the God we praise above comes after. It makes you feel good to feel like when you do good, that God is watching over us. There are these checks and balances. And when we experience our beliefs that God is watching us through certain acts that validate that belief, we feel closer to God. Now, we're no closer to God without the checks and balances, but making ourselves think that it sometimes actually can help us. So, what are some of the rules that go into following the higher power? And this would be called a code of conduct of sorts. Here are some good ground rules from a belief system that aims at trying to understand why we might be answering to God. One of the rules is that we should not steal anymore from anyone, especially if the person is less fortunate. Another rule would be taking the life of another person. Now, the punishment is worse when the person taking the life of the person was unprovoked. Committing an act of adultery is also something that you have to answer to. Now, notice so far the things that I have outlined in this section. These are typically the commandments one should live by, outlined by God. Even people who don't believe in God tend to follow these commandments. But when these rules are broken, what tends to happen to the person who breaks these rules? So we have to ask about punishments for broken rules. While growing up in the church as a child, you would hear about the punishments from breaking the rules of God. In society, as we move about, there really aren't any punishments for not being a good person. But you would be surprised how many people who don't even believe in God still live by the fear of this punishment. Now, for the sake of this episode, this is for the people who actually believe in your actions can get you into trouble with God. In this case, your punishments once you get to heaven will be doled out to you by God. And most often, you will have to atone for what you have done here on earth. If you cannot convince God that you are remorseful for why you are standing before Him, then you can almost certainly guarantee a spot for yourself in hell. Here in the underworld is the greatest punishment one can get. This is how you will have to answer to God. Or is it? Because answering to God is the punishment, right? No. Just because you have to answer to God does not mean you are being punished. So what is answering to God? See, when you die and have to stand before God and receive your judgment, this is the moment when you have to go over everything you have done on earth. And God will let you know what you have done to further in order to gain entry. Now, it sounds similar to the punishments, and to a degree it is. But when you are being judged, God will also compliment you for all the good you've done also here on earth. Let's for a second use myself as an example. If I had to answer to God up to this point in my life, I'm pretty sure that I can plead my case. Now, for the people who have not lived their lives on the straight and narrow, they should have a reason to worry. Because for them to have to answer to God means either forced to plead their case or some sort of punishment. This is why I guess it pays to be good on earth. Now, let's look at literal versus the figurative meaning of answering to God. When you observe the idea of God being someone we answer to, we have to think about this two ways, literal and figurative. Literal views are far more something of the past than the present. Today, answering to a higher power seems more of something that just does not exist. We have to answer more to each other here on earth than afterlife. But then again, how do we truly know what happens after we die? The views from a religious standpoint could be real. Because think about it. None of us have been dead to know if it were true. So you could have to answer to God. But there's only one way to find out. Then again, it's a catch-22 because you can't return to tell people about it. And with this end statement, while we have to know if we answer to a higher power. This is an interesting question to ask, especially since there are so many people who don't believe they answer to God. But for the people who believe in God, they live their lives a certain way just in case God exists. But let's say for a second, for the sake of this episode, we answer to God. Then what that means is that we must live our lives straight so we don't get judged too harshly. Now, in my opinion, I live good for good's sake. And hopefully, just hopefully, if there were to be a God, then you might say I'm ready to be judged. So thanks for listening to In the Know. I'll be bringing you another episode regarding religion. The topic will be asking the question, can we anticipate the end of time? Which in religion is Armageddon.